I ponder the point at which Strauss, almost like a donkey, adamantly, obstinately refuses to go forward with Husserl and Heidegger. Um, he studied Husserl and Heidegger all of his days, but he said at the bottom of his being he couldn't hold with um, their vision. But he tried to see. He said he tried to see what they were seeing. For Strauss, just as for the citizens' understanding, on the whole, the example of standing on the ground as what Plato would call pistis reliance, sense reliance, and at the same time knowing that the Earth is spinning at an amazingly rapid rate, and that we're moving through the universe in other ways and so on, is just as it is for anyone. It's impressive, it's interesting, but it doesn't cause us to go over to the Husserlian phenomenology. We can kind of shrug it off. So I believe, so far as I can tell, the great emphasis that Heidegger puts on the sense certainty in Descartes, it can be misleading from the point of view of us moderns, as it were, is so far as we still suppose ourselves to know where we are in time, because we forget that Plato spoke of pistis, of reliance, and we forget the whole image of what I was calling the cogency out of the senses. So if you go back from Descartes 300 years or so, you see the medieval theologians speaking of scientia in terms of a kind of sense certainty, which is just basically the apprehension of things such as standing on the ground. And this is a kind of knowledge. This is scientia. This is knowledge. But the whole point is that they're trying to go up from that to knowledge of God, for instance, which, for instance, Thomas tries to get through what he calls, I don't know, I'm not sure the Latin, but whatever corresponds to analogy, analogia or so, I don't know. But maybe that's Greek. But in any case, by likeness, you can say such things as that there's good in the earth, and good is like God. And so you can approach this so-called supra-rational knowledge, which is basically behind the project of theology, the purpose of theology, to get to the supra-rational knowledge. What Descartes does, so far as I can tell, is in showing that the things that are in one form, I'm calling this one form of the ontological difference. There's a sort of Socratic, what Descartes does is he knocks out all the higher things, such as God, such as being, the bare disappearing whiff of being, as Nietzsche calls it, and he ensconces instead only the lower part, the sense certainty, only the but it's not sense certainty, it's certainty that that which doesn't appear to the eyes. I'm going to gloss it this way. Certainty that doesn't appear to the eyes is, namely, ourselves, leaving that sort of open what ourselves means, because those things that do appear to, letting the eyes stand for all the senses, because those things that do appear, whatever they may be, they're at least assure us that we are there. And the strangest case, I suppose, being our own reflection, since in the way that seems that it's the visible sign of this which is the sum. So the simplest form of let's go through three forms of ontological difference as I see it. One is this Socratic form of the things that appear in the mirror and the things that don't. So from the Straussian point of view, when we speak of this formula, Michael Millerman has brought out that how formulaic this formula can become the all things. Straussians like to speak of all things. It does seem that all things doesn't necessarily imply ontological difference, because you can think of all things as things which are visual, things which appear. You don't have to add also appear for me. All things, discrete things, tangible things, all things. This isn't necessarily ontological difference included in that phrase. But I think from the Socratic point of view, there's a kind of ontological difference between the whole visual world and the soul or nous. And maybe that's not so. On the other side, and I have to mention, as a saving clause, as it were, that of course we shouldn't mistake this as a caveat. We shouldn't mistake ontological difference for the reflections of Thales or Anaximander or whoever these guys that said everything is water or everything is or Heraclitus, and this kind of thing is what more like what Heidegger's accusing Nietzsche of. Something calculative, understood as the being of beings. But let's set that aside for the moment. Then this Cartesian, or let's say the Husserlian ontological difference, is basically is the thing that doesn't appear in the mirror, which is the sum, the ourselves, and then all the things. And so what I've been wondering about is how much cogency. So it seems that Strauss doesn't accept even that cogency as a starting point, but he's studied it all his life, and he tried to understand how to stand on that ground. But he obdurately would not approach, and he didn't find that Husserl had suddenly taken the dust off his eyes and showed him something in all its sharpness and freshness. Rather, there's something that's not quite cogent from his point of view in Husserl's so-called ground of grounds, as it were. Heidegger, it seems to me, proposes even a third ontological difference, which is that of time. Time has contrasted time, let's say, as a while, as long as it takes to hear a flock of pigeons make the noises they make as they flutter about. Time, and also the two parts of the Husserlian or the Cartesian difference. Time coming into the center rather than consciousness and the visual or the sense stuff, rather than consciousness and its objects. Reflections like these, which are hard to see the cogency in, relate, then I would say, so far as we go on looking at the Heidegger's seminar on Nietzsche, Nietzsche's second essay in the Thoughts Out of Season, thinking that the Ereignis or event can break into the conversation, can break into our thinking on it in speech. This is the cogency of this, which is not either ourselves or something we can see, uh, is what Heidegger claims to be guiding us to, I believe. So far as I can, just one last little footnote. I don't think that the proposed etymology of Aragnes is correct so far as I can see. I think that Aragnes, what Heidegger means is more in the direction of a true ownmostness, eigness. It doesn't mean like Augen or something. It's not about it's not visual. There's no envisaging a being. Rather, Heidegger sometimes there's no speech that can reach it, apparently, because it goes beyond speech, just as Wittgenstein says, I can see what Heidegger means when he says there must be something beyond speech. The Aragnes is not about envisioning, as some others say, through a peculiar etymology, but I think it's about let's gloss it as a true ownmostness. So let's go on and with. So we should not forget that these things are at the core of what we're trying to get to.